Hi, welcome to the new voting project. My name is Kunal, your host, back at it again. And today we're here with Joon Baek, the Columbia University Student Body President. Thank you, Joon, for taking the time to be here with us today. I understand you are back in your motherland, I guess, here in Korea. So I understand you're super busy, but thank you so much for joining me on the show. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Of course, of course.
Love to be here.
Yes, yes, as I assume anybody would. So let's dive into these questions. Um, for our viewers, I guess, give a little background on yourself. And since you're kind of here representing Columbia University, talk about how maybe your collegiate experience or your high school. How did education kind of plan for what you're doing today or aspiring to do as a college graduate?
Yeah, so I could give like a little spiel about what I've done so far. I'm the student body president of the Columbia College Student Council. Among Columbia University, they have multiple schools, and I'm the head of the Columbia College Student Council, which is the biggest undergraduate school. And I think that throughout my college experience, I've majored in computer science and physics, which is technically traditionally not the most political or advocacy heavy major. Yet the reason I was interested in running for student council government is that I am an international student from South Korea. And especially over the past 4 years, while I was an undergrad, there's been such a shift in the political discourse in America regarding foreign students and immigrants in general. And I felt that by getting involved in campus politics and being an advocate for students, I could try to at least do my job in shaping some part of that narrative.
Right, right. And you think college, Columbia is a very, prominent university. Do you think that prepared you to pursue, computer science and physics?
Yeah, definitely. Columbia University is a really fine institution with a lot of emphasis on research activities. And throughout my time at Columbia, I managed to get really good experiences and opportunities, not only in research, but also in network and the quality of education. It helped me to get involved in research that I never thought I would be involved in, as long as meet professors and really great thinkers all alike. And not only that, I think that Columbia University prides itself in a very holistic liberal arts education. And it really emphasizes on these core curriculum of critical thought. And I think that its curricula helped me to become more active politically than if I went to any other school. To be honest, before I entered the university, I wasn't that much politically active. Politics wasn't a thing that I was interested in. Yet, thankfully, the school really encourages you to take some action, whether it be as an advocate or as an activist or in any way or shape or form, try to get involved with your community.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you went to Columbia. Um, and as an aspiring student wanting to go to Columbia, this is music to my ears. You know what I mean? I'm very politically active in California. Um, but yeah, those were great answers. Moving on to our next question, I think you kind of um, answered it a little bit, but why run for an elected position? You have no background, or I guess before you went into university, no real thought to do so. Just the general term, why run for an elected position, no matter how, no matter the scale of the position, why run?
Yeah, so I think there are two reasons why I decided to run. First is a bit about it's actually more relevant to my experience as an international student. So I'm a South Korean, and a lot of South Korean people have to serve in the military service. It's considered a mandatory military service. So I actually enrolled in Columbia at the fall of 2015, and then took 2 years off after my freshman year to serve in the Korean Army, and came back on fall 2018. So during my freshman and sophomore year, I served about 21 months at the Korean Army, situated at the demilitarized zone, which is a border between North and South Korea. And during my time there, there was two big changes, both politically and personally. First is that there was a change in the administration, and what happened was that I realized, not only for me and for my other international friends, is that it became more harder for them in terms of uh, visa, in terms of administrative work, in terms of feeling accepted in America. And that I felt like a remarked shift when I came back for my sophomore year. That there was a really different kind of political discourse in America, and I wanted to like shape that in one way or form. Another part is that personally, as I served in the army, I came to think a lot more about the community I work in. Uh, Having that kind of like service makes you think, okay, what are other ways I could like do my service for the community? And I felt that like running and being part of the student government is the most sure way to make sure that I could advocate for not only for myself, for other international students.
Right, yeah. That's really unique. I almost forgot that you're right. South Korean citizens, I think by mandated law, must perform what you said, 2 years of service, right?
Yep.
Uh, that's really interesting. Do you think that that helped shape your current experiences or outlook on, I guess, life, worldly events?
I would say, yeah. There's one particular incident that I want to like tell you. It happened during November of 2017. Uh, I was just like doing my regular work. It was actually my day off. The work I did during the army was to provide security services for the visitors who come to the DMZ area. So whether it be the high-ranked politicians or these like government officials and military commanders, whatnot, it would be part of my job to like make sure that they're all safe, and then also like have them like uh, have them like around the DMZ area. Uh, on that day, on that day, there was a North Korean soldier who wanted to like escape to South Korea. So he drove a car literally across the border, and North Korean soldiers were firing at that guy, trying to like kill him before he could like come to South Korea. And when that incident happened, there was like alarms in the base, a lot. There was like a really tense moments for a day, and I felt, at least when that happened, that there's gonna be a war, and that okay, my God, it's actually happening. I
Right,
never expected it would happen, but it looks like this might be like my final day or something.
right.
And unfortunately, that didn't happen. The war did not happen, and a
Yeah,
lot of people didn't die. But it's like one of those events in your life where you realize, okay, like just like that, your life could be over. The peace and the relative status quo that you get so accustomed to might not actually be that stable. That in by a sudden mix of bad luck and like negative intent, the thing that you cherish, whether it be your family, whether it be your like career, whether it be your neighborhood or your community, could be very much in danger. And and I think that was like a very big wake up call for me, realizing that I can't be just taking care of my own self. Like, okay, I only care about my career. I only care about the job I have. No, I realize that there's a bigger world out there. And if we don't try to take care of it, everything we cherish might disappear. And that really was a wake up call.
oh, that's some intense shit. I mean, I don't know how else to characterize it. Wow, okay. Brink of War brought you to a catharsis. That's yeah, I could understand that. I guess leading into my next question, you had mentioned some of the political changes in the United States. Um,
Mhm.
what were your thoughts on the 2020 election? Right, very tumultuous time, you could argue. Um,
Yeah.
especially on voting rights issues, civil rights, human rights in some cases. It was a hectic year. It was very strange and peculiar with a pandemic too. Once in a century, that happens.
Yeah.
So what were your thoughts on the 2020 election? Kind of run through your stream of consciousness there.
Okay, so I have about like two things I kind of wanted to say. One, both as a foreigner looking into the American society, and one thing I realized is that it's so easy. I never felt that it would be so easy to for people to try to, how to call it, try to topple the system. I felt that, okay, like, of course, this must be an election. I'm sure there must be some rigorous safeguarding rules to prevent people from just saying, oh, the election is rigged. Okay, like, I'm not going to take it. No, I thought there's going to be more rigorous way to dispel such accusations. Yet I realized that it's, I never realized how the system itself could be questioned. Like, at least, like, and so I was very much worried about the legitimacy of the election results. Like, even if there are no like signs of voter fraud or whatnot, uh, there are at least a good 30% of entire American population think that the the President Joe Biden has been elected illegally. And
Right.
if you think about that, if you have that like 30% of 40% of the people thinking that the government itself is illegitimate, then it's just, how could you govern? Like, how could a democracy function? So that's like one part that I was like very much shocked, that just as simple as like tallying who gets to be the winner, which is in a sense the legitimacy, the bedrock legitimacy of any kind of democratic system, could be so easily questioned, even if there was no hard evidence of it being in any way compromised. So that got me like a bit worried. Another part is that as a foreigner, I also got to see how there were people in there who are doing the job in the part of the system, trying to make sure that it works as it should be. So, for example, what happened in like that Secretary of State in Georgia, how he kind of like Trump called him like maybe like the day after the election, saying that, oh, you got to find some votes, and he kind of like refused that political pressure. Uh, how like Mike Pence, for example, like even if like Trump like pressured him to like say that, oh, like just say that I'm the president, like he didn't like bulge in, which like, if you think about it, is a very low bar. It's like basically them doing the job.
Right.
But the fact that we're talking about the low bar, the bare minimum necessity of making sure that democracy works as it should be, as in we're like exalting as something that is a very great and grateful thing that happened. That was also like very troubling, but also it's like in a sense comforting that there are still some people in the system who want to make sure that it doesn't like crumble apart. So it's both good and bad, I would say.
Yeah. Interesting. And I think, do you, out of curiosity, do you have the right to vote in the United States?
Nope, I'm not a U.S. citizen.
Not a U.S. citizen. And um, how how exactly does voting work in South Korea, if I may ask?
Yeah, like I think that this actually like shows a Korean voting system and American voting system are very, very different in terms of the bureaucracy that has come involved in it. So I would say that the Korean voting system itself is very centralized. Whereas in America, you have basically like state by state voting system where the voting system could be very different from state by state. In Korea, you have a very centralized, federalized voting system where it really doesn't matter like uh, it has like the same consistent policy throughout the entire country. So that gives some sense of the uniformity, uh, but also like um, might be the benefit of American system is that you could experiment with various voting policies. For example, in New York, they have the rank choice voting, which is kind of like unheard of or kind of impossible to do back in Korea because everything must be should be the same. I'll say that like if I were to focus a bit more on the voting rights, I would say that Korea is good in the sense that everybody has a government issued ID that they have to legally get when they turn of legal age. And that could be, and that is used uh, to make sure that you have a voting ID. And what is even better is that there is no separate process of registering to vote. That if you have that ID, if you become a legal adult, you are automatically registered to vote. And I think that's a and I think that's a pretty great system in terms of making sure that there are no people who are disenfranchised. Uh, and so I think that's like a one good thing. On the other hand, I do believe that the difference between Korea and America is that it's sheer size in volume and in space in terms of geography. So the Korea itself is a fairly you could still reach out, physically go to that any like government office, which is about like 30 at max like an hour away. So it's not like that far. The government infrastructure is not that far away. Whereas America, you do have these places that are very, very remote where it's very hard to get those kind of government services. So I could see why America has developed a tradition of voting by mail, which is not the case in Korea. There is no voting by mail in Korea. It's all in-person voting. So I can see why like different voting habits and different voting policies came about in these two kind of countries. And I wouldn't say it's like I wouldn't say it is wise to just say, okay, one system is better over the other, mainly because, like for example, like one system might not work in America and vice versa.
Right. And how important would you say or characterize is voting? Why is the right to vote such a critical issue? Like you must be aware, um, in South Korea, the right to vote is so, I guess, universally applied to each citizen, right? It's so seamless. Why do
Yeah.
you think it's so difficult in the United States? The right to vote is kind of starting to become um, restricted in some ways.
Yeah, I think that at least in the to say in the case of Korea, Korea has doesn't have that much of a long history of democracy compared to the United States.
Yeah.
United States has about, let's say, about like 250-ish like history of democracy where it continues to evolve over time, and it like continuously had like a wider as the time went on, it had like a wider range of people who could participate in the process. Korea was just like basically thrown into this democratic system in about past 40 years. That's when we started to actually have real direct elections for presidents. And it had a long string of dictators for the past 40-ish years before it actually achieved its full-on democracy. So, I mean, like people uh, making the bulk of Korean political class are those people who actually fought for democracy. So, like the current president of South Korea himself was a human rights lawyer who fought for democracy. My father, for one, when he was in college, you told me stories of how he like participated in protests and demonstrations against the dictatorship for voting and for democracy. So in a sense, like at least the current makeup of the Korean political class are people who value uh, voting rights, and I think that that respect for voting rights has managed to implement itself through these like organizations and through these policies which are set in stone. So, and nobody like questions, mostly like questions the results of the democracy, results of elections. So there's like a broad societal consensus that voting rights are important and that there needs to be adequate government support, uh, bureaucratic support to make sure that voting is as seamless as possible. America, on the other hand, I think that the one part of the reason why it's so complicated is that it's really like state by state. Each state has its own separate voting system,
We have a history
and
of
I think yeah,
Yeah, we have a history of something called states' rights.
hmm
This country. I don't. I'm sure you studied American history. It's quite a ride.
yeah, I think that like that's like one part reason why like for example like New York might have a different voting system compared to Texas, and how if you have a politically opportunistic, like how to call it, if you basically I feel like if a certain party controls all the governor and the two state legislators, then they could actually enact rules that would try to limit voting
Right.
by state. And I think that's
Like
a
in Georgia, I don't know how familiar you are, but in Georgia, that's exactly what's
mhm,
happening.
yeah, and I think that's really frightening that like piece by piece they could like chop off the voting rights of civic state, and I think that's a it's a very dangerous thing that's happening right now.
Right. And I would just say, do you have any, I guess, pending in the future, if you become a citizen of the US or if you stay in South Korea, do you have any aspirations to run for office in an elected field?
I would say yeah. I always felt that like ever since I came from the army, I was like I started to get interested in the political process. I'm still trying to figure out like what kind of like what what kind of vision I have for the country and for my community. And I'm just trying to figure out, okay, then what are the visions I have and what could I do? What is the set of skills and set of experience that I could use to utilize to make those kind of changes? So I'll say I'm trying to figure things out.
Good. Yeah. It's not an easy question to answer. But you're more than welcome to come back on the show if you do decide to run for anything. We'd be happy to have you back talking about
Love to.
policy. Yeah. In closing, I guess, kind of talking about generations to come, what is your advice to my generation? The 17, 16-year-olds, we call ourselves Gen Z, I guess. Um, how can we make an impact, not only voting, elections, getting good education, staying engaged? What would you say to us, just coming out of that system?
I think that one thing that hasn't entered the political discourse yet, which I think should, is lowering the voting age. So currently, the voting age is 18 in America, which means that at least for a lot of people in high school, they're excluded from the political system
Right.
in any kind of like method. I think that like they should like maybe like lower it to like 16, for example. Uh, when I mean, like, I think that like high school students are very much capable of being active in the political field, and like if you are on TikTok, you can actually see these like Gen Z
I
commentators and
stay
like
away from TikTok.
personalities, yeah, like and people like you, yeah, who are
Yeah.
even more active in political system and the political process than any of the millennials or boomers. So I think that like the conversation about lowering the voting age, I think that's a conversation I haven't seen anywhere, but I think it's worth having that conversation discourse going.
Right. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree anymore. Um, yeah, no, lowering the voting age. I personally do not stay. I don't have. Purposefully don't have TikTok on because I feel if you ask me, that's the real pandemic. All right, for all you viewers out there, TikTok is a pandemic. Trust me, you get sucked in to that field of vision. But yes, yeah, thank you so much for your advice. Um, is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
I'm just like curious, like how about you? Like I just want to like
Oh,
get to know you a bit more as
I'm
well,
supposed to
like what got
interview.
you interested in the project?
I'm supposed to interview you, by the way. That's how it works. Um, repeat the question for me, will you?
What got you interested in this project?
In this project, well,
Hmm.
I it's a good question. I uh, I do a lot of heavy political campaigning and consulting in the Bay Area. Um, so everything from regional, local, municipal, state, or federal elections I've put my hand into. So, I like to say I've seen a little bit about political discourse in the process that, like you said, is bureaucratic, it's sclerotic, and it's definitely not the most appeasing process. It's very difficult to navigate through. Uh, so what got me interested in this project is I noticed a trend of, our simple right to vote, right? I have the the ability and the fortune of knowing many civil rights activists here in my community. And what I hear from them is we've been struggling to find the right to vote since the 60s. And if you argue with me, the Constitution clearly outlines that every man, in quotes, should have inalienable rights. That was written by Thomas Jefferson himself. So it's difficult for me to comprehend that voting rights, the simple act of casting a ballot. We vote in our family, corporate votes in their own business structures. We vote to preserve our democracy, but yet that simple act is being tarnished, right? And that's unacceptable. So this project is meant to shed a light on any different perspective. We're talking professors, academics, students like yourself who become engaged and are willing to take that challenge. Candidates for state assembly or state senate. I'm hoping to have attorneys of law and actors and activists and really anybody. I don't discriminate. To have on this show and shed a light on the injustices that are happening in this country, right? Top to bottom, it all relates. But the one thing you can't take away is our right to an opinion, and I guess in some sequitur, the right to vote. Yeah, vote for me for president, guys. No, I'm playing. Um, I gotta cover.
I'll be looking forward to your political career, but also I think what you say definitely makes sense.
Yeah,
Voting is the lifeline of democracy, and people can't vote, and the system itself is in peril.
yeah. It's at we are at a precipice. I've been saying for the past year since 2020. These are the transformative years we have, and especially as Gen Z recognizes and understands the problems. I want to be part of the response. You know, that's my wish. But yes, we're looking. I'm looking forward to following your career as well. Maybe being an astronaut or something, or if you become the head of Google, just call me with the CS. I'm not too far away from Google.
I'll let you know, see how it goes.
Yeah, but thank you so much, June, for giving us your insight, your advice, especially as a student. I think you're the inaugural student I've had on the channel so far. Yeah, so it's something to be proud of, I guess. And I think people will find your story, I think, very, very welcoming and I guess what the American dream is supposed to be. Except you got to come back to America. Do
Got
that
it.
after the pandemic. Stay safe.
Got it.
And thank you so much for joining me on the show. Of
Thank you very much. It was lovely to talk to you.
course, anytime, anytime. Peace out, dude.